Hey guys, so I'm here with my June wrap-up. Now June was a great reading month for me. I read 12 books and I didn't give any of them less than a 3.5 stars, and only one of them was a 3.5, and I had like a lot of 5-star books, which doesn't usually happen. But let's go ahead and get started. The first book that I read in June was Saint Anything by Sarah Dessen. If you don't know, I'm a huge Sarah Dessen fan, and this is her 12th book, I believe. And this follows a girl named Sydney whose brother injured somebody in a hit-and-run accident, and he's in prison, and she's kind of having to deal with that and, you know, living up to her parents, because her parents they don't trust her very much because they don't want her to turn out how her brother did. But it's really good. It's one of her better ones, I would say. And I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely would recommend this one. The next book I read was Onyx by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the second book in the Lux series. This one was not as good as the first one. This is an alien paranormal romance series, and I can't exactly say what about it wasn't as good as the first one, but I just didn't enjoy it as much. But I do want to continue the series, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read I started in May, but I finished in June, and that was An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. This has been getting a lot of hype, and I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a fantasy set in kind of an alternate Rome, I guess, and it follows 2 kids named Leia and Elias. It took me a long time to get into it. It took me almost half of the book to get into it, and that's why it took me so long to read, because I put it down for a while because I just wanted to read other things. And I did pick it up and finished it, and I loved the ending. Like, it really picked up, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. And there's a second book that I think comes out next year, and I can't wait to read that one and find out what happens, because this definitely ended on a cliffhanger. The next book I read was All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. Now this book follows 2 kids, Violet and Finch is kind of suicidal, and Violet's sister had passed away like a year before, and she's kind of dealing with that, and they meet and obviously fall in love, because that's what happens in these kind of books. This book was slightly disappointing for me, actually. I was just expecting more out of it. It was described as The Fault in Our Stars meets Eleanor and Park, and those are 2 of my favorite books of all time. So I had too high of expectations, I think, and I was just down a little bit. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, though. The next book I read was Venom by Fiona Paul. This is a historical fiction book set in Venice. It follows a girl named Cassandra, or Cass they call her, and she is living in Venice. She's wealthy, and she's engaged to marry a guy that she hasn't seen in a while. She knew him when she was younger, but she hadn't seen him in a long time. But anyway, she falls in love with an artist, which is kind of not supposed to happen, obviously. And they are trying to solve a mystery story, and it's really good. It's kind of like a murder mystery / historical thing. I don't know. It's really, really good. I absolutely love this book. It surprised me a lot because I didn't really know what to expect going into it, because I haven't heard a ton about it. But I ended up giving this a full 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Miss Mayhem, which is the sequel to Rebel Belle by Rachel Hawkins. And this book it's definitely not as good as the first one. I kind of put off reading it because I kept hearing people say it wasn't as good, and I definitely agree that it wasn't as good. It wasn't terrible, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Revenge, Ice Cream, and Other Things Best Served Cold by Katie Finn, who is also Morgan Matson. This is the sequel to Broken Hearts, Fences, and Other Things to Mend. I know she has really long titles for this series, but it's just a really fun, summery, contemporary series, and I liked this one a lot more than the first one. The first one I found a little bit predictable, but I just love Morgan Matson / Katie Finn's books, and I really enjoyed this one a lot. And I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait for the third one, but it doesn't come out until 2017. I think it's because she's probably working on her Morgan Matson book, which comes out next year, which I'm excited about, but this one ended like on a huge cliffhanger, and I want to know what happens, but I have to wait like 2 years. So I'm not very happy about that. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this series, and definitely Katie Finn and Morgan Matson, like anything by them. The next book that I read was The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This book, it's a fantasy book. It's a retelling of 1001 Nights. It's about this boy who every night he takes a new bride, and she's executed at dawn, and so the main character, her best friend had been a victim of this prince, and so she decides to to marry him so that she can kill him. But this book surprised me. I'm not a huge fantasy person. It's been getting a lot of hype, and so I was a little nervous. I didn't know exactly what to expect. It was a really quick read. Like, I flew through it, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait for the second book next year. I think it comes out. The next book that I read was Vanishing Girls by Lauren Oliver. If you don't know, Lauren Oliver is like one of my favorite authors. She's an auto-buy author for me. Like, I'll buy, if she comes out with a new book, I'll probably buy it. So anyway, this book follows two girls who are sisters. They are not speaking anymore because one of the sisters was injured in an accident, and it's just like dealing with all that, and there's kind of a mystery aspect to it because the girl disappears, and there's a huge twist at the end that I did not see coming. In this book, it started out a little bit slow, but it picked up in like the last 200 pages I read in like one sitting because it was just so good, and I had to know what was going to happen, and Lauren Oliver is just the best. I just love her books, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Iron Trial by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. This is about a boy named Cal who's a part of the Iron Trial to see if he can get into this magic school called the Magisterium, but he wants to fail, and so he tries his hardest to fail, but he doesn't fail, obviously, because if he failed, there would be no book. So he has to go to this magic school, and it reminded me a lot of Harry Potter. Like, it's not similar to Harry Potter, but just the feel to it, just reminded me a lot of Harry Potter, and I just had a really fun time reading this, and I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, but I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and the second book comes out in September, and I can't wait to pick that up and read that too. The next book I read was Losing Hope by Colleen Hoover. This is the sequel/companion to Hopeless, which I read in December, and I'm glad I waited to read this because it's basically just a retelling of the first book from the male's point of view, and I enjoyed getting back into the story and hearing from Holder's point of view, and I liked this, I think, just as much as the first one. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read was Top 8 by Katie Finn, also Morgan Matson, you know, same author as Revenge Ice Cream and Everything's Best Served Cold. This is her first book that she wrote, and it was definitely not as good as her other books, but I still enjoyed it a lot. It was just a fun read. It's about a girl whose Facebook, well, it's not Facebook, it's called Friendverse, but it's kind of like Facebook, I suppose, is hacked, and she has to deal with all of the consequences of that. And it was just a really fun read, and there's 2 more books after this, and I can't wait to read those too. And I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that's all the books I read in the month of June. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye!